So my name is Nicole Carter. I'm a part of the digital curriculum crew. And again, Kristen, let me know if my audio is not doing well because my previous PD, my audio was not the best.
Okay, it's
Um,
in and out, but it's okay, Nicole. I think just make sure your hair is pulled back.
oh, you
If
think
that
that's
helps.
what it is?
I wonder.
Okay, let's just do that. Okay. Okay, so what was I going to say? Someone's saying in a previous PD using iPads at home instead of Chromebooks. Kristen can speak to that.
Um,
Not sure if we know any more information on that.
I know that we're definitely talking about it and working on it, but I don't know if there's been a confirmed district message that yes, it's happening.
Okay, but it's in talks.
It is absolutely in talks.
Awesome. Okay, so today we're kind of talking a little bit about how to engage students and about the teaching portion, but honestly, it depends on how far you go with using your teacher iPad, because it definitely goes into some of your responding with feedback as well. So we kind of are going to veer into the check section because we'll talk a little bit about SpeedGrader as well. Just as always, thinking about with an equity lens, one thing I would mention, because I'm going to talk a little bit about attaching your iPad to your laptop, and there is a definite reason for me saying that that's the way to go if you're going to record anything off of your iPad. And I might even demo what it sounds like, but you could also practice at home as well. When you record from an app or using the screen record feature on your iPad, which there is one, and I can show you how to do that. But if you are using a stylus, if you are touching the screen at all while you are writing, the internal microphone on the iPad actually picks that up and can be incredibly distracting for the students listening. So if we have any students that need that direct instruction auditorily, it can be a major distraction. So I am definitely recommending that if you are recording anything off of your iPad, actually make the connection with your charging cord to your laptop instead of recording from the iPad for that reason. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, I would recommend getting a stylus if at all possible. So the Apple Pencil, but it is spendy, right? It's $100. So what I've seen on Amazon recently is this kind of dupe or knockoff that is very similar to the Apple Pencil that you can get as cheap as $15. And I would definitely recommend that. The ones I would avoid are the ones with the rounded tips, just simply because as we talk about doing annotation within a Newsella article or something like that, you want a finer control of your marking on the iPad. And those fatter tipped ones don't give you that. So these are ones that I would recommend. And then there's other ones that have these kind of plastic discs on the end that I also really like. I have a couple of those here at home too. And those are ones I would recommend if I didn't have the Apple Pencil. If we are able to try and get an iPad out for teachers, like Kristen gave you that access to that Google form where we're gathering that information, they probably wouldn't come with an iPad pencil. That's an additional cost that we don't have those just lying around. But you can in fact get pretty cheap styluses. I just would be paying attention to ones that will give you finer control over what you're writing. Okay, so in terms of connecting your iPad to create instructional videos, there's a couple of ways that we can do that. One is to connect using Quicktime to record what's going on your computer. And then the other one is to connect using Zoom, which is actually even easier. So I'm kind of starting with a more difficult one here with Quicktime. And basically all you're going to do is you're going to take your charging cord and you're going to plug it into your computer and plug it into your iPad. And then you're going to open up QuickTime. To find QuickTime on your computer, you can just do a spotlight search, or you can go into your applications and it's in a other folder and find it there. I use QuickTime a lot, so it's actually something that I've put into my dock so that I can access it anytime and I don't have to go searching for it. Once I open up QuickTime, I'm going to go up to the top and click on File. And you can kind of try this with me right now if you want to. And if you're running into issues, this is the time to ask for questions. But once you go to File, you have to click on New Movie Recording. It's the only one that this one's going to work with. Now, if when you plug your iPad into your computer, if your iPad pops up and says, "Do you trust this computer?" you need to say yes. Otherwise, it won't work. It will block access to your laptop. So once you open up that new movie recording, your face will probably pop up because it's going to open up like your webcam. And you're going to want to click on the down arrow next to the record button and find, instead of FaceTime, you're going to find your iPad. And if you don't find it right away, well, then you might have to do some troubleshooting after we're done with this Zoom. Because sometimes for me, what I have to do is unplug and replug it back in. And sometimes I even have to restart my computer so that it recognizes that my iPad is plugged in. If you find that you're having way too many troubles with connecting the QuickTime, then I would just suggest go to Zoom instead and use Zoom. So the one thing to also remember too with QuickTime is that it doesn't record both what's happening on your iPad screen and then also your face. It just does one thing. Whereas Zoom would be able to capture your face and the screen recording. So keep that in mind. Why are we talking about connecting and making these recordings? So this comes back to if you are wanting to show, I don't know, annotation of an article, if you're wanting to show how to write a sentence, if you're wanting to show any spelling pieces, if you're wanting to work through a math problem, I would recommend going onto your iPad and using a stylus and handwriting instead of, using your trackpad on your computer. Yeah. So if QuickTime isn't working, so here, let's talk about Zoom, because again, I think it's even easier. So what you're going to do is the same thing, use your charging cord plugged into your computer. You're going to launch a Zoom meeting. And then after you launch that Zoom meeting, you're going to hit the share screen button. Now there's two options to show your iPad. One is through AirPlay. The other is with the cable. So whether you're making a recording or you're using your iPad live in Zoom, because you can use your iPad as like a document camera, I would use the cable instead of that AirPlay option. And that's just, again, because it's going to cut down on any lag that you might have, because it's not going to pull data from the bandwidth if you're doing AirPlay instead of the cable. So you'll have a quicker, faster connection using the cable. And then you just hit the share button and you should be able to see your iPad. And in fact, I'll do that now, which will give Kristen some time to tell me to back up and answer questions if I need to.
Yeah. Nicole, can you talk about, I know you just said that if you can't find QuickTime on your iPad, then go ahead and use
QuickTime. QuickTime is not on your iPad. QuickTime is on your teacher laptop. So you're not going to install QuickTime on your iPad. You're looking for it on your teacher laptop. And if when you're in QuickTime and you can't find your iPad in that drop-down arrow function, then there's a couple of troubleshootings you could do, which is just unplug and replug and maybe even restart your computer. And if it's still causing you issues, then yeah, the workaround would just go into Zoom. So you plug it in. For Zoom, you plug it in like I told you, and then you just hit that share screen and then select your iPad. So now you should see my iPad screen, right? You all can see my iPad screen.
Yep.
Okay. So once I'm in my iPad screen, then I can do any number of items. And remember, I'm in Zoom, so I can press record. So this could be used live while you're doing a synchronous lesson with your students, or you can use Zoom to record something that you want to give to your students later, like a quick instructional video. Any app that you have on here that you'd like to use, you can then use with your students. So let's say like you wanted to show kids how to access, Sora on your iPad or something, right? Like you could record that process. Okay. So, and I said this yesterday. Let's just, this was me like showing everybody yesterday using my iPad. So I'm in Notability right now, but there's any number of like whiteboard apps that you could potentially use. So just think of your iPad as if it's like a, you know, like a document camera, and anything you might want to write or do in a document camera, you can do here, right? So, and then they can see that live, or again, you're recording it. So again, my preface for talking about why you would record using your computer instead of recording straight on the iPad itself is because as you're writing, think of the pencil hitting the screen of your iPad. It's actually really loud, and that sound is going to be picked up by the iPad's internal microphone, and then your audio will be kind of awful if you again are making an instructional video. But it couldn't be easier, I don't think, to share through Zoom. And this could be a great way to have a document camera instead of trying to, you know, have some canned goods holding a board with your phone and all that nastiness. Like, you can just use this. And as I've prefaced before too, if you have a printout, so I would, in fact, if I was doing, sorry if I'm making all sorts of noise on my end, but if I had like a printout, instead of doing a live document camera style feed, I would in fact just take a picture of what it is I would like to write over. So it's not a live view necessarily, but anything that I take a picture of, then I can, in a lot of whiteboard apps, I can write right over the top of it. I can usually also zoom in. It's giving me a hard time right now, probably because I'm on Zoom, but normally I can zoom in. There we go. It was just giving me a time. So I can zoom in so I can see really clearly what I'm looking at. So that's, again, if I needed like a quote unquote document camera, I would instead take a picture. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that before I move on, Kristen?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay.
Can you just mention the annotation app that you were using?
Oh yeah, so I'm using Notability, and I'm gonna I'm sharing my screen one more time with you. And then I'll talk a little bit more about some other app options in just a minute. Another thought I had with a teacher iPad is utilizing it as a second screen while you are in Zoom. I just finished my advanced Zoom session an hour ago, and I definitely I would recommend that if you have time, go back and watch that video, because we talk about a lot of different ways to engage students within breakout rooms and during live Zoom sessions. And then different ways for you to potentially monitor those breakout rooms. And one of those, I think, is to actually have a second screen. So what I would recommend is downloading Zoom, the app, on your iPad. And then you'd have to create an account for like your own personal email or something, because you can't log in using your BSD email on two different devices. So in order to make the second screen option work, you'd have to log in with a personal email. But then you would be able to, and it takes some doing. So I would definitely recommend, if at all possible, get your team together and get into a Zoom and play with some of these different things to see if it will work for you. Because even for me, sometimes I get feedback, like an echo and a loud pitch sound. So you have to play around with the settings a little bit, mute different things, so that this is almost just like an extra screen where you could kind of jump in and see what people are doing. But even in my advanced Zoom session, we use things like Google Slides, or you could use like Formative, so that when you give kids a task in a breakout room, you can watch what they're doing without even having to jump in. Another just quick tip, and someone else mentioned the idea of getting volunteers, district volunteers. They've gone through the process, but getting volunteers to come into synchronous classrooms and help you monitor breakout rooms in a Zoom. But anyways, I just wanted to say you'd have to get the app on your iPad, but then you could potentially utilize it as a second screen. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit, because we did get Newsela for everyone at this point. So Newsela on your iPad is, something, once you figure out how to get articles, whether that's from Newsela or from CNN or wherever, once you figure out how to get like a PDF into an app on your computer that you can annotate over the top, then it becomes a whole new ball game. So the app that I definitely would choose over any others is Notability. And I've mentioned this multiple times in the past. Many of our math teachers have access to Notability. If you have like a team at your building that has teacher iPads and you're very interested in the idea of using Notability, when you have at least 20 people sign up to buy an app, you get it 50% off. Notability is expensive. In my opinion, it's expensive. It's $9 or $10, $9.99. But when you get 20 people to buy it, it's $5, and maybe that's a little bit more approachable. What our math people have found is that Notability allows you to back up all of your files to Google Drive. And so then you could share those files to Canvas so your students can get access to your annotations at any time. It just automatically backs up. Like, you don't have to do anything other than that one time moving the folder in to Canvas. So when you're in Newsela, and if you want to go ahead and follow along with me, you can. So open up a tab and go into Newsela and log in with your BSD email. And if you find an article, what I found the easiest way to get it into an app for you to annotate over the top of is that you have to hit the print button. And then once you hit the print button, we're hitting your decision. It doesn't matter if you go article only or if you want to actually go through the kit quiz with your students. You can, you choose which one you want. I chose article only. And then once I'm there, when I was doing this on my iPad, I was using the Chrome app to do it. And up at the top right-hand corner, if you're in Safari or you're in Chrome, the share out button is that little square that has an arrow, an up arrow. So you can either pick that, or down in the bottom right-hand corner, it will say open in. So if you pick either of those options, it will open the article in whatever app you would like to use it. In this case, I sent it into Notability. And then once it's in Notability, I can write over the top of it and do all of my annotations. So I would use this in a couple of different capacities. I would use this in Zoom during a synchronous session, or I would use this potentially recording it as I go through and read through the article and talk and do the whole annotation piece. When I was in the classroom pre-COVID, I would use this in front of the class. They would have access to the article in front of them, especially with our secondary students that have the newer Chromebooks that have the Stylus. As soon as they pull that Stylus open and they open up the article, they can write all over the top of it, or they can use an app like Cami. So they could annotate along with me. But again, the whole point is, it doesn't matter if you're an English teacher, if you're a science teacher, like the odds are you're reading articles and you're annotating things, right? So the same process works no matter if you're in Newsela or if you've got an article off of CNN. Any kind of article or PDF can be moved into something like Notability. Now, if you didn't have Notability, there's a couple of other options that you potentially could look at. And I was going to change this because I looked on our self-service, and Byboard is not an option anymore in our teacher self-service. You could, in fact, use, instead of Byboard, you could use Show Me, or you could use Edu Creations. Those are both options that are kind of like whiteboards. And when I say whiteboards, I'm just saying that they are just a big whiteboard-like thing that you can write over the top of, and you can add images on top of. So you could also open up Newsela and just take a screenshot of the article and move it into a whiteboard app and write over the top of it. Those would work as well. Jamboard is one that I definitely would recommend you downloading. It's free. It's a part of the Google Apps. And surprisingly, the Jamboard app is better than the web option. It's got stickers and better tools than the browser option. So Jamboard, and what that means is when you open up the Jamboard, it's going to have you log into your BSD Google account, your email. And then it's just attached to your Google Drive. So you've got now Jamboards that will show up in your Google Drive that, just like any other Google product, can be shared with students and teammates. And it's basically just like a big whiteboard that you can add sticky notes to, and you can write over the top of, add text to, add pictures to, and then it slides. So it's not It's not an infinite whiteboard, meaning you can zoom in and out and move all over the canvas. It's just one static size, and then you can go up to the top and add new slides and move between the slides as you go. So a couple of different options. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about was going into Canvas. So I was trying to think if I have teachers in here that are elementary Seesaw users. I was trying to think of a way that your teacher iPad could be used similar to Speedgrader. And I will say some of the things that make having a teacher iPad and your efficiency work so much better is actually taking advantage of your speech to text options. So within Seesaw, you can definitely go in, and if you're assigning any of the mastery level targets and you're grading things, grading tasks and activities in Seesaw, you can go in and touch the stars, because it has like 4 stars for things, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong if they've updated that, but you select your stars, you can type feedback, or with your iPad, use the speech to text and just verbally do your text feedback, and that actually can save you time. You can talk a lot faster than you can type. So that's one way to cut down on the time that's spent for providing feedback. But for my secondary teachers that are using Canvas, once you go into the iPad app for Canvas, the teacher app, sorry, then what you're going to do is go into the assignments. And then again, because writing with a trackpad can be really difficult. So when you're actually in, and I'm going to open up what you guys are actually seeing there so I can show you live. But when you're in Speedgrader on your iPad and you have a stylus, hold on, I'm going to make it so you can see my iPad. Okay. So you have all of these tools where you can write right over the essay and highlight and add comments. And then you also have the ability, can you guys see? Okay, good, you can. So when I go down to the comment section and I hit the plus sign next to the comment, I can record audio and I can record video feedback, which you can also do on the computer. It's just, you know, if I'm in here and I'm already annotating, then I can really quickly also give that kind of feedback and comment as well. You can do the same process on the computer, it's just harder with a trackpad, and with a stylus it's just a lot easier. And then in the Speedgrader you can just swipe to view the other assignments, so you can go really fast. Okay, so Kristen, pull me back in to give live demos or talk or answer questions, because that was kind of, and I'm at the half-hour mark, so good. Okay, good. So now we have enough time for questions and live demos. So let me know what I need to go back and go over.
Yeah, can you talk about, when you mentioned Seesaw and the speech to text feature, can you talk about what that looks like again?
Well, sometimes it's hard because we don't always have students in our demo classes. So let me just see. I'm going to go in and see if I have the ability to even do that. But just anytime you're in on your iPad, because it knows, just like on your phone when you're texting someone, you have the ability at any time to do speech to text when you're texting. And you can do the exact same thing on your phone. Okay, so I have no idea if this will work, but let's just see. Okay. Okay, so do you guys see how I went to go and write a comment, and then next to my space bar is the little microphone? So it's literally, hey, Jonah, I think you need to work on adding in I don't know, right? But it's like that simple, right? So you're just looking for the microphone, just like you would if you were doing a text.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And then can you talk about if you're using Notability or any other app and I want to bring something from the web in, can you walk through like what that icon looks like to
Yeah.
export something?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's that Newsella article. So I went into Chrome and I went into Newsella and I used my BSD login to log in, and I find the article that I want. And then sorry, hold on. Okay, so it's right here. I can't really zoom in more for you guys, but there's this section or button here, and that is your share out button. So it looks similar to that no matter what browser app you use, whether you use Safari app on your iPad or you use the Chrome app on your iPad, you're looking for that little button. But actually from this screen, I would hit the print button. This is the way you have to do it on Newsella actually, because if you hit the share out button from here, then it doesn't give you, it's like, it gives you this fake like article thing that is telling you have to log in and use an account. So you have to go with Newsella specifically, you have to hit that print button, and then you have to print article or make your selection, article only, article with quiz or whatever. And so here's that article ready to go. It does not have the quiz in it. And you'll notice that I get at the bottom, I get that open in at the very bottom left-hand corner, or I can click the share out up here at the top. And then these are all of the apps that I potentially can move it into to write. It's saying to write over the top of it. For me, I would use Notability. Okay, so once I hit
Awesome.
that, I don't know if I need to keep going because not everybody has Notability, but once I get that, then I'm going to say I want to create a new note. I can decide what the title is going to be, and I can decide what space in Notability I want it to go to. So think of Notability as kind of almost like a 3-ring binder, student binder kind of a thing. So you can have dividers within it that you can tell it where to go. And then I just hit import and it sends it to Notability. So to get it, I'd have to go into Notability. And here it is. Here's that article. And it gives a nice version for me to then read through with the students, highlight, and do that whole thing.
Nice. So to recap, you're on your iPad. You went to the web version versus the student app version.
To get that article.
To get the article.
Yeah, I opened up the website. Yeah.
And then the weird, tricky thing with Newsella is that you have to do that print piece.
Yes. Otherwise, if I use just the share out from here, I'll show you what happens. Besides it freezing. Do you see how the image just says you need to create a Newsella account? Like it doesn't send the article, so you have to do that print for them. But if I were to go to CNN, it's the same deal. And if you find like a PDF online too, you can move that in as well. So if I'm ever doing work and someone sends me a gigantic PDF, I will then go onto my iPad and move it. I just prefer to move it and read it in, so same deal. I'm in CNN and I'm clicking share out. And I'm taxing my internet right now for sure. But it will, you get the idea. So same process, exact same process. So Patricia is asking, would you do it with a different web page when you wouldn't use a print version first? Yeah, sometimes though, if it does give you the print version, it's a nice cleaner example because it just cuts down like some of the ads and extra images. So if there is an option to go to a printable version, I would actually use that because it's going to give you a nicer, cleaner article. Okay. Other questions, Kristen?
We've had a couple questions of if I'm using my iPad and there's an app that you've mentioned and I don't see it
Uh-huh.
um, and it's not in self-service.
Yeah.
My guess is that that's probably help desk request.
Yeah. I mean, every building is technically kind of set up slightly different. So if you have a CST at your building that is the sole person in charge of you downloading apps and stuff, like some of them like completely cut off access to like the app store and stuff. So it would be a help desk ticket at that point. If you do have access to the app store, no one would stop you from, and that honestly, it's a one-time purchase for something like Notability, and I bought it back in 2011, I think. So I spent $9 in 2011, and Notability has been installed on every single iPad I've used since 2011. I just keep reinstalling it. It was a purchase I spent my own money on. I mean, I know we don't always want to do that. So if you can get, team members ahead of time to come together and say, hey, we want this and the building will reimburse you, go ahead. But if you do have access, you could just buy it yourself. It's well worth it, in my opinion. I use it for so many things, note taking and everything. Personally, when I'm in a meeting or whatever, I'll use it for that. But otherwise, it's not something that as a district we've purchased a ton that we have available to push out to people. That's not necessarily what has happened. So it is something that either you purchase yourself or you go to like your admin and bulk purchase or something like that. Those are options for sure. Otherwise, you can look and see if there's other, I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I have so many apps that are very similar to Notability. And at this point, I don't remember. Hold on. I don't remember if I bought them or not, to be perfectly honest. I know that sounds awful, but like the Scribble app that you're seeing on my screen, you could try that. The InkFlow app that you're seeing, that's one that might be a good one. Notes Writer is one you can maybe try. These are all three. OneNote. Some people really like OneNote. OneNote is attached to Microsoft, so technically you could, and it's free. So you could download OneNote, sign in with your BSD email, and then learn that program. I personally don't like it. I've lost a ton of content in OneNote, and so it's not one that I necessarily recommend to people for that reason, because I've lost too much stuff on it. But it is free, and it is attached to like our Microsoft Outlook account, so it's one that you could try as well. Some people really like it. Yeah, I recommended Jamboard, and there's a lot on here, you guys, that you could start diving into if you feel comfortable with your iPad. If we're talking about how is a teacher iPad a good part of my teaching kit, I think anytime you think to yourself, well, I would handwrite that. I would write that out under a document camera. I would write that out on my whiteboard. Well, that's where you would go to your iPad, right? So if you're doing a synchronous lesson or you're creating a video and any of those things are things that you would normally handwrite, go to your iPad to do that. You can create a lot of really great videos using your iPad. Technically speaking, your iPad should have a better camera than the webcam on your MacBook. So if you can make audio work with your iPad, recording some videos with that might be something. The TouchCast Studio app, you do have access to in self-service. That is a whole nother ball game. It could have its own training all on its own, because it's like a green screen app that has all sorts of stuff embedded in it, whiteboards and things that they call VAPs that you can add in. So that's a whole nother thing, but you could explore TouchCast Studio as well. That's an app you can install. So there's lots of options. Jamboard, if I haven't mentioned, because I see someone mentioning it in here, is a great one to use and free, and it's a part of the Google Suite. Yeah, Rick is mentioning GoodNotes, and I have GoodNotes as well. So GoodNotes is slightly different because it gives you, you're seeing a planner. So it gives you the ability to create these kind of notebooks. So if that is something that you enjoy, it gives you kind of like a notebook version. Whereas Notability, if I go back, it's not as pretty necessarily, but it gets the job done. And like I said, it backs up to Google Drive, so you can share that folder into Canvas, for example, and your students can access all of your notes, and it just updates automatically. Kristen, anything else? I'll pause so you can jump in.
Um, we had somebody ask a smart question of, hey, can we make a list of everybody who's interested and maybe do it in bulk? So one of my thoughts is to just put it in that Google form.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of compile that back out if that sounds acceptable.